Okay,
Got it.
great. So just a bit about Future Frontline, which obviously we're about a part of. I'm the dietetics director and Claudia is our dietetics officer. And just a quick bit, so it's Future Frontline is a resource for all the aspiring and current healthcare students, as well as the professionals, to share their stories and inspire tomorrow's healthcare workers. And that's what we hope we're doing for all the future dietitians, hopefully. And you can always check out their Instagram, their Twitter, their YouTube page.
Here you go.
Yeah, just Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube page. So just a quick little what we'll be covering that today. So we're going to start off by introducing our roles, Claudia and I. We quite have different roles at the moment, so I thought it would be really useful to give you guys some insight into what we do. And then we've got some questions from Instagram that we, when we introduce about the webinar, which we will answer them. And then in the end, we will give you guys the opportunity to ask us anything you would like to ask us. Oh.
Okay, as Amira mentioned, our roles are sort of as different as it gets. So I'm a dietitian in a hospital and I only do inpatients, which essentially means that all the patients that I see have a bed on the ward. They are all admitted. I don't do any outpatients, while Amira currently does the community post, which essentially means that, yeah, she's going to tell you a bit more about it, but it's essentially home visits, clinics and community hospital. So that's a bit of an overlap, I guess. But other than that, we do very, very different stuff. The reason why it's my typical day and Amira's typical week is that in hospital, the day-to-day work is quite similar. You're obviously getting different patients and different sort of tasks every day, but how your days are scheduled is quite repetitive. While in community, Amira does something different every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday. So it just makes more sense to have it this way. Yeah, so I work in one of the North London hospitals. It's a tertiary centre, so quite a big hospital. And I currently cover area which is called complex medicine, which seems very, very vague, and that's exactly what it is. It's loads of different areas, but essentially all the more complex patients that have more than one condition normally. So I cover acute admissions, which is essentially like a general medicine ward where people get admitted because they get admitted there before they sort of get sorted onto the appropriate wards. I cover infectious disease ward, which normally would have HIV and TB patients. At the moment, largely dominated by COVID. So it's mainly just COVID patients. I cover a respiratory ward, which again sort of feeds into COVID. There's quite a few COVID patients there, but also COPD patients and loads of sort of different lung conditions. I also cover, it's called HDU, which is high dependency unit, and it's step downs from ICU. So people who are sort of well enough not to be in ICU in the intensive care anymore, but not well enough to be on the ward. And I also cover just like a mixed ward with sort of oncology patients, loads of liver and renal patients, but who normally have more than one condition. Yeah, so that's sort of just the background of what I do. And as I said, I don't have any outpatient clinics. It's completely just inpatient hospital work. So how I start my day, I normally come into the office. I have to change into scrubs because I work on infectious diseases wards. Then I sit down at my laptop, I check all the emails. I normally get loads of community handovers for people who were admitted into hospital from community, which Amira will be able to tell you a bit more about in a second. I get some just very general communication from, you know, the rest of the team. So I just get my head around that. I check all the new referrals, which after the weekend, I normally get quite a few. At the moment, they are all done via the electronic system. I have to triage the referrals. So a lot of them sort of may be inappropriate, or if they are appropriate, I have to sort of see how high of a priority they are compared to the rest of the patients on my caseload, add them to my caseload. Then I look at my caseload as a whole, which at the moment is very, very hectic because I cover 4 wards and the winter pressures are coming. So I normally try to sort of see who needs to be seen today, who can be seen tomorrow, who can be seen the day after tomorrow. If there's too many patients to be seen on one day, then what I can safely and confidently do, then I ask the rest of the team for help, because there are patients that just need to be seen on the day. And if you can't do it, you can't do it, which is a big thing that you will learn as a Band 5. And I think that's probably something that we will mention coming forward. And then I prep to see my patients, head to the ward, see normally sort of 3 to 4 patients in the morning, have my lunch, which is really important to take your lunch break, which again, I know that one of the questions that we got from Instagram sort of taps into that. How do you make sure that you do take your lunch break? And then after that is done, in the NHS, it's always half an hour for your lunch, which I know a lot of our students have been complaining about, that it's not enough time, especially if you're in a big hospital where the lift system is not that great. But again, that's something to get used to. And then I basically do the same in the afternoon. So I normally, again, prep to see sort of 3 to 4 patients and head back to the wards. I have my own laptop, which is very helpful because that means that I can write up my notes as I go. So I normally write up my notes as I see the patient and then sort of just submit them after I see the patient. And then I'm back in the office, again, doing any community handovers. If I have any home enteral feeding patients, that's a lot of admin. But again, that will depend on the patients that you have at the moment. So the day-to-day work is quite similar, but then it depends sort of what kind of patients you're seeing on that day, if that makes sense. And on some days I will have MDTs. So that's a multidisciplinary team meeting, which essentially means that all of the healthcare professionals involved in patients' care on that particular ward or under that particular medical team sit down in a room and just talk through everyone patient by patient, just to make sure that we're all aware of what's going on with them, especially as most of the patients in my caseload are quite complex. So there's loads of healthcare professionals involved in the care. There's normally a speech and language therapist, a physiotherapist, loads of members of medical team, the nurse in charge is always there as well, just to know what's going on and ask as dietitians. And I have quite a few of these purely because I cover quite a few medical teams. So I have one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Friday. And again, that's sort of an hour out of your life that you have to account for. But yeah, I think more is going to become apparent as we answer the questions, but that's sort of the background of what my day-to-day life looks like.
Thank you, Claudia. So my typical week is within my post. So my post is rotational. So for the first 6 months, I'm going to be in the community, and then after 6 months, I'll be back into the acute settings, which is
I do that as well. So I'm currently in complex medical, but from February I'm in surgical, and then sort of help the elderly. But yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. So yeah, the first 6 months I'm going to be in community, and then after that I will be heading back to acute, and I think I'll be with the gastro and surgical team. So it's a 6-month rotational post, which is really nice. So with community, as we mentioned, every day is different. So how my week would look like on Monday mornings, I would do home visits. So it'd be about 3 patients. We would just go to their house. Usually they're housebound patients. That's the whole reason why you would need to go and visit them at home. And then you would go back to your office, or you even have the option to work from home to do your afternoon clinic. So that's typically how my Monday and Tuesday are. And then on Wednesday, I run a full outpatient clinics. And then Thursday would be my community hospital, which is kind of a tiny hospital ward, which is nice because you still get to do those inpatient things, obviously on a more smaller scale with much less patients than Claudia's. And then on Friday, it would be more like admin work, and then just trying to prep for my Monday morning home visits and clinics. So the type of patients that I would be getting in the community, it actually really does vary, but usually my home visits would be with elderly patients who are housebound for, it could be any reason. And then the clinics, it just, again, it very varies from every patient. The clinic that I cover is the one that when patients are in hospital and they need to be urgently seen by someone once they're discharged, that's the clinic I cover. So it's like a quick rapid access clinic. In community, there's a lot of admin. I would say there's much more admin than acute, in terms of like you really do take the social factors so much in your assessments, so much in your plans. You're going to be referring and being in contact with so many other people. For example, social prescribing services. If you realize your patient's having some financial difficulties that's been impacting or putting them at risk with their health, for example. Care agencies, that's some those are a lot of those are type of people that you'd really want to get in contact with, making sure that the carers that those patients are having or know what your nutritional plan is. So there's a lot of things to think out in community that goes beyond acute, and you have to really do put those social factors in consideration. It's still very new to me, and I'm still trying to learn more, obviously. But yeah, it's been quite really interesting. And within how my day goes with the patients and the clinics and the home visits, obviously there will be team meetings within the team, or also on my community hospital, we also do multidisciplinary meetings. So that's where going to be the doctor, the nurses, the physios, the discharge coordinator as well. So you do still get to have that acute setting in. And in terms of there are obviously in the community, some other people would be covering care homes, for example. That's not something on my caseload at the moment, but I know my colleagues in the community would be covering care homes. There's going to be GP clinics. But yeah, I think that is quite an overall week of how the community is. It's very varied. You're all over the place sometimes, going from patients' houses, going from clinic to back to the office, but in the same time it's kind of relaxed in a way, because if you do get your own laptop, you get your own work phone. So if you realize, okay, I can just do my clinics over the telephone at home, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, it's quite a very different mix between how my week and days go, like compared to Claudia's as an acute dietitian. But that's just a brief outlook on how my week is. And as Claudia said, now by answering the questions, more details will just come through.
And I just had a thing that it might be a good idea for a future webinar to compare acute versus community setting, because there's a lot of quite separate points that I'm very tempted to make, but I know that that's not the point of this webinar. So let's move on to the question from Instagram. The first one was, do you get any supervision as band 5s? And I can sort of start on this one.
Yeah.
It is something that I would say is a good thing to ask about when you're having your interview. What supervision, what support is available for new band 5s? Because I know this can really differ from hospital to hospital. Probably again different in community as well. So for me, I still get supervision. It's not the same sort of supervision as in placement, that you have sort of people walking to patients with you and doing assessments with you, or that people are looking at sort of over your notes. That doesn't happen anymore. But I have something that's called clinical supervision. And it's essentially a meeting every sort of 6 to 8 weeks, or if I need something more urgently, that can sort of be arranged as well, where it's very much led by me. So I'll go to my supervisor, who's a band 6 dietitian, and just sort of bring anything that I want to talk about. That can be clinical or non-clinical. So we go through case studies, but that's essentially my patients. So I sort of make a case study and ask for her opinion. Or it might be about how to prioritize your caseloads most efficiently, which has been really helpful in my particular role over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, so you still get supervision, just in a slightly different form than it would have happened on placement.
I would say, to answer that question, yeah, I would say the same. You do get supervision. It's very different to how it is on placement, but which kind of links to our second question. Do you get any support in transitioning between a student dietitian and a band 5? Yes, you do. Your colleagues and your supervisors know that you're a fresh graduate, so they know what to expect, and they know that you might need support. And the thing is, as a band 5, you're always learning. And even as a band 6 or a 7, you're always learning. So in terms of support within the team, the one thing I've learned is that you can always ask, no matter, there's no such thing as a stupid question, even when you're qualified, even when you're working. I always ask questions. I mean, it's been my 3rd week now, and I'll tell you, I've been asking questions every single day, and that's absolutely fine. And they're not shocked by it, or like, oh, Amita, you're asking so many questions. They're really expecting it. Like, it would have
asking questions.
Yeah. So you do get the support. Yeah, you still do get a lot of support.
I think that's a very tricky question, and I'm not sure if it's more tricky in the acute setting or no, but NHS is severely understaffed, very, very understaffed, very, very busy. So for me, I would say that the transition was very abrupt. So I started my role, did some online training on the first day. Second day, I had a meeting with the catering just to get my head around everything. And then in the afternoon of my second day, I got my full caseload. So there wasn't much of a transition. I sort of started straight into having a full caseload. So on my 3rd day, I already had to sort of see who needs to be seen on that day and sort of get rolling. But as Amira said, there are people in the office always, and everyone's aware that you're band 5. But that's where the responsibility is on you in a way to ask questions. And it's really, really important. Let me just admit the person. Yeah. It's really important that you do that. Never feel like, oh, I'm asking way too many questions. I should have known that. I'm qualified now. Because everyone's expecting you to ask questions. Yeah. But you might find yourself in a position where people are not asking you questions. You might sort of notice that people are not really checking in on you as frequently as you would want to feel comfortable. But that's just the nature of the public sort of healthcare system and the pressures. But I can assure you that everyone's more than happy to answer any questions that you might have and to support you as best as they can.
Great. Now going to our 3rd questions. Are you allowed to shadow people from time to time? I think I might have a different answer to you, Claudia. I don't know if you, but my answer would be that I did discuss this with my supervisor, and she said that if I'm interested in something, I could obviously request it. But again, I have to keep in mind, according to my caseload, like you can't just go like, oh, can I take this day off to just shadow? But no, like you do have your caseload that you need to manage. You're getting things done. You do have your responsibilities, but you can work your way around it. So if you found, okay, I'll do that, and then maybe this half afternoon I'll be available, and then you can ask for it, then yeah, that could work. So yeah, managing your caseload accordingly, and you can always ask if you want to shadow anyone.
I think that's very similar for me, to be honest, and that really links into question I think number 8, sort of how different is being band 5 to being a student. And the main difference is that you're very independent with your days. So you do have people that you need to see, but it's up to you sort of what order you see them in, especially more so in inpatient setting, because for community you obviously schedule home visits, or the patients who you are seeing, they have the appointment, so they know that they will be seen at this and this time on this and this day. But in hospital, it's very much up to you who you see and when. So if you do want to shadow anyone, you can always sort of make sure that you speed through the patients a bit more, or if the patients can wait to be seen the next day, that's always an option as well. And then it's up to you to sort of arrange with anyone who you do want to shadow, just to do that, and that's more than fine. And it doesn't have to be a dietitian even. So I've shadowed speech and language therapists when they were doing swallow assessments. I've shadowed physios when they were doing chest physio, and all that sort of stuff. And it's actually really encouraged, at least in my team and in my trust, because it really leads to your continuous professional development, and just getting better understanding of the holistic care of a patient. But as Amira mentioned, you just have to sort of factor that in your caseload planning and when you will be able to do that. My clinical supervisor did say it's slightly different to shadowing, but if I would ever want her to sort of shadow me, to come to see a patient with me, that's absolutely fine to ask about as well, especially because I'm doing HDU at the moment, so the high dependency unit, and most of these patients are a bit more complex than a typical band 5 caseload. So yeah, she was more than happy to sort of come with me and sort of do a reverse shadowing session, her shadowing me and answering any questions and queries that I might have.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. And our fourth question, how do you get experience in areas you want to specialize in when you're working from 9 to 5? I think that quite goes back to what we talked about. It's all about you got to manage your own caseload. You have to find the time basically, and then just ask for it.
Yeah, it's exactly that, to be honest. I'm not sure how it works in your trust, but we do have something that's called a study leave. So
Yeah,
you will
same.
be able to request a study leave, which
Yeah.
is essentially like annual leave, but it doesn't come out of your annual leave allowance. It's a separate sort of set of days off that you can request, but it has to be approved by your manager,
Yeah.
by your clinical supervisor as well, I think, and sort of by the lead of the service. So they have to see that it will really benefit you in the current post, which is quite tricky. So for me, it will change 100 times by the time I get there, but I think I might want to specialize in diabetes, which is very much outpatient, which is very, very different to my current role. So if I wanted to request a study leave to shadow a diabetes dietitian, that would be quite problematic because it doesn't directly feed into my current role. So technically the trust, they can't really see the benefit of me doing it. So in that case, you might need to do it in your own time. Yeah, you either have to sort of reprioritize your caseload to get the time to do it, or you might be able to do some shadowing over the weekend, for example, if that's someone who works freelance, who works privately, that might be an option. So you just have to get quite creative with how you want to go about it.
Exactly. And something else to keep in mind when applying for jobs is look at the rotations that this job offers, because some job offers would have the rotations that you think you'd want to specialize in, or it's something that you're interested in, and some for some posts would just be not even rotational, but would just be a fixed things. And if you know that's not one of the potential things that you might be interested in to specialize in, then is that really the job you want to go for? So just something to keep in mind.
At the same time, be really open-minded, because it will change 100 of times what you want to specialize in when you sort of see a particular type of a patient, which 100%. I've already had so many times in the last 3 months.
Exactly. If you ask me every week, I would tell you I want to specialize in something different. So it's good to have an open mind.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I didn't know about, and we do in our hospital, for example, you have band 6 roles that rotate every 6 months as well.
Mm-hmm.
So our band 6 rotate between renal, ICU, surgical, oncology, and something else, I think. So that can be an option as well if you want to work on a band 6 level, because you've already got your band 5 experience, but you're not sure what you want to specialize in, or you want to get experience in more than one area. That's also always an option.
Great. Now, do you finally get some free time in the evenings?
I love this question.
You go ahead and answer it first.
In the placement sense, definitely, because you don't have any essays to write anymore, and you're more than encouraged to sort of wrap up your workload within your 9 to 5 hours. So you will never be asked to do anything in the evening. That's at least how the NHS works. Obviously, it will be probably a bit different in private sector, but in the NHS, you're more than encouraged to not work beyond 5 p.m. Or in my case, I'm doing 8:30 to 4:30, but that's sort of the same thing. So yes, definitely. I think as a new band 5, you will still get quite a lot of extra reading that you want to do. So it's not something that you're obliged to do, but it's something that you might quite benefit from, especially if you're starting a new area. So for me, I definitely had to do quite a lot of reading, purely because some of the areas that I cover, I have not done on placement, and some of the patients that I cover, or most of the patients that I cover, are very complex. So I've done a lot of like ESPEN guidelines reading, going back through my dietetic manual, and that sort of stuff. But it's not something that you have to do anymore, like you did on placement, where you have to do your clinical observation form and your end of week review and write 3 essays. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, my answer would be the same in terms of like the extra things you would do. Again, that's all up to you if you want to do it or not. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all those social factors and the referrals that you need to do in the community. So yeah, it gets busy, but again, it's all up to you. And as Claudia said, it's really highly encouraged not to work more than 5 after 5. So yeah,
And the
going
one
to
thing that I would definitely recommend from myself, from my own experience, try to schedule some social things to do in the week. I definitely noticed that the first sort of month where I really threw myself into the work and sort of getting used to the 9 to 5 routine, like having to get up every morning and do the same thing until 5 p.m. I was really exhausted in the first month. And I definitely found myself just sort of waiting for Friday, waiting for Saturday to finally see my friends, to do some things that are not work. And then I sort of realized that I can do these things in the evening, sort of from Monday to Friday as well. And that really helped my sort of work-life balance and mental health in general. So I would definitely encourage people to do that if you do have the mental and physical capacity to do anything after work, because that's really variable.
Yeah, I completely agree. How do you make sure you leave on time and take your lunch break?
I don't know if I should go first. I still don't always do that. I think it's definitely work in progress, and you do work on it slowly and gradually and sort of learn what can be left for the next day. So at the beginning, I was very reluctant to leave any sort of note writing or any like GP letters, community referrals for the next day, where in reality, they really can wait. But it's all about getting your head around what can wait and what can't wait, because there will be things that you just need to stay a bit later for if you can't do them from 9 to 5, because they just need to be done on that day. And that's the price that you pay for working with people, where everything is really dynamic and it's sort of important that it's done on time.
Yeah. And
But I think it's all about how, it's all about how you prioritize your tasks again. And it is something that you learn on the job, and also something that should be raised with your clinical supervisor, because they can always advise on this. If you feel that your caseload is too big for you to manage, then obviously raise that as well, because it might be that the wards can be redistributed in acute setting at least. You would normally have another band 5 who maybe is not struggling as much, and they might be able to pick up one of your wards, for example.
yeah, exactly. And to be honest, it's something that I'm still working on myself. I don't recall leaving at 5 anytime this week, but again,
That's bad.
It is 100% is bad, and that's what I'm working on. But again, something else comes with it is just give it time. By time you'll just get your head around the system better. You'll as he said, as Claudia said, you'll know what can wait for tomorrow, what can need to get done today. So it just takes time, it takes experience. But I think an important thing to put out here is just don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you need help or you're struggling, raise that to your supervisor.
And hopefully you will be in a supportive environment that will encourage you to get out of the office. Like in my office, if I'm ever staying even 5 minutes beyond 5, I always get someone approaching me and asking, are you almost done? Are you leaving? Is there anything that I can help with? Like, you have to go. So
yeah, it's nice. Something else in the community that's also I noticed that's different from the acute is that you're a bit more flexible with time. So you do sometimes get with your colleagues and just have lunch together, which is really quite nice and not something I ever had in my acute placement.
I always have lunch with other people, but
amazing. See,
it really does depend on the team.
Yeah, it really depends on the team and the trust. That's 100% sure. Because I remember on my placement, in my acute setting, I don't recall anyone in the team doing that. That was very occasional. But in the community, it's quite more normal to do it.
Yeah. So and I think in the community, you probably have fewer emergencies in a way.
Yeah.
The days a bit more scheduled. Where for me, I carry a bleep, which essentially is a small radio that I have to sort of attach to my waist. And it's going off at least sort of 10 times a day. And a new patient had a nasogastric tube inserted and they need a regimen. So that's something that you haven't scheduled into your day, but you have to do it as a matter of urgency, essentially. So that can really sort of have a knock-on effect on the other patients that you need to see that day. And that's probably the biggest thing that you have to get used to in your band 5 role. It's quite easy to sort of have a plan in the morning and then your whole plan is turned completely upside down by noon, by sort of lunchtime. And then that's sort of thinking about, can these patients wait until tomorrow, on the day after tomorrow? Do I have to find someone else to see them now that I can't see them today? And I would say definitely don't stay overtime when that happens, which is easier said than done, but there are other avenues that you can explore.
Yeah, 100%. And even in the community, even though we like get booked appointments and who we're gonna home visit and who are we gonna call, for example, we still have all other things that in terms of like you want to try a supplement with a patient. So you have to do your own ordering. So I would have to order that supplement to the patient's address home. And then I would have to wait a couple of days, give them a call, see how they tolerated that supplement, all went well, see where we can go. And then I would have to do a GP prescription. And that usually would be just extra things added to my already booked in appointments day. So again, I think it's just all about trying to manage your caseload and just have effective time management skills, which I know will come by time. So yeah, I think that it is.
Yeah. Do staff treat you differently when you're not a student anymore? How do you feel about it, Amira?
I mean, it's kind of my answer would be different because I'm working in the same trust that I was doing my 18 weeks of placement. So it was nice just because I knew some or most of the people working in the team. As you said, it's just they know me, they know who I am, they know that I'm a student, so they know what to expect from me as a very fresh graduate, a band 5 dietitian. You do feel like you're a member of the team. You do feel like you fit in, you do belong with a team, but I just feel like, okay, I'm learning a lot, which is really great. And again, it's really important to have a good supported team and to always reach out to them. But I do feel in terms of different treatment, you're not as supervised as in terms of like, oh, did you finish this? Did you finish that? Do you have any questions? As Claudia said, it's all you who have to take initiative and do all of that.
Have you ever found it weird being in the same trust?
I mean, it was a bit weird in the beginning because I was just like, I'm so used to like, oh, okay, that went well. So what do you think? Give me some feedback. And now it's just like, why do you want feedback? Like you do your own style, you do your own thing, you know? So it's just like, it's weird at the beginning in a way, but it's also really, really nice just because we're kind of familiar with how the system works, with how the trust is with the team. So I really, really like it, and I'm glad. Yeah, it's great. What would you say?
In a way, it's similar, but also very different because I'm in a completely different hospital, never been there before, on placement or as a person. Like I've never been to that hospital before I started working there. And it is quite a bit different because obviously you're coming in as a professional. So your team members just treat you as an equal, even though you are a band 5. So they will sort of take care of you in a way, but you're still just a team member. You're just a colleague to them and not, a student anymore that they have to supervise. I would say I definitely noticed different relationship with the ward staff, so sort of the nurses, other healthcare professionals, because you sort of have to take on the leadership of the dietetic component of patients' care. So quite often I sort of have to take the initiative to go and educate them, for example, on certain aspects of the care, like how to complete screening and all that sort of stuff, which as a student I didn't really think about. I would just sort of go into the ward, see my patients, and that's it. But also because you are on the same ward for 6 months, in my case, you really get to know them. So again, you're more of a friend with them and not sort of a student asking them to do something. And they don't see you as a student as well. You're a bit more annoying, a bit less annoying, I would say, to them, because you sort of 100%. Know what questions to ask at this point. So it's definitely different relationship, and I would say it's a better relationship than as a student. So if that's something that you're struggling with at the moment, I think for me on placement it was really difficult because I was with a different team every week. So the wards would be completely different as well. I didn't know any of the nurses because by the time you get to know them on Friday, you're changing on Monday again. So I'm not sure if it completely comes from not being a student anymore, or if it comes from being somewhere for 6 months rather than a week. But the relationship is definitely different.
Yeah, Yeah, I think it's the fact as well that we kept on rotating and being with different teams as well. Yeah,
I think it might be
100%.
different for someone who was on placement, with the same team on the same
Yeah.
wards, or in like a district general hospital,
Mm.
where you tend to be, on the same wards for the whole placement, over 18 weeks. The relationships may be similar. Where for me, there was definitely significant difference in how we approach people.
Yeah, that's 100%, especially with not like even the dietetics teams, like even within the dietitians, we would be rotating the teams, but we're always kind of in the same kind of big offices and we know each other. But the fact that the nurses, the medical team, the speech and language therapist, that's like, yeah, just I never know them, they never know me. But I'm sure now, as you said, you being a member of staff there, they're more aware who you are and not just a new face they just saw on the wards this day. So
I think for me, it's also a bit different because in my hospital, we don't have a dietetic department, which sounds really odd to people. We have a therapy team. So I'm in a complex medicine and a critical care therapy team. So even in my office, I have 4 other dietitians out of 50 working in the hospital, sort of 20 physios, 3 speech and language therapists, and 2 OTs. So that's my team on a day-to-day basis. So I probably know a lot of the speech and language therapists way better than I know the dietitians, which is a bit funny. But then again, that's different from hospital to hospital. And I think the trust I'm in currently is quite unique in that sense. So
that's
that
really
definitely
quite
has
interesting.
a relationship with team. Yeah.
That's really nice. Interesting.
I do really enjoy it. So that might be something that you want to ask about when you're doing your job interview as well, sort of how the offices and teams are organized. Because if that's something that you would prefer, again, it's not that common, but it might be something that you take into consideration.
Great. How does a day in the life as a band 5 compare to a day in the life as a student dietitian?
It doesn't.
Yeah. I think with being a student dietitian, I think the main differences would be as a student, even as let's say in your consolidation and you're fully independent, your supervisor still need to go through your notes, approve of your plan, and then you would need to like upload it, for example. Or you would usually be given the set of patients sometimes, or like would be given specific words or just specific complexity of patients that you might be able to see as a student. But as a band 5, you don't get that. No one's going to read over your notes unless you ask them what you think of my plan. You don't get to choose your patients, you just get what you get. And I think the one big shock for me going from a student to a band 5 is the whole admin that comes with it. I remember like as a student, we would do the whole main assessment. I'm like, oh, okay, so this patient would get referred to this place, but I never actually did the referral. Or, oh, this patient would need a GP letter. We would do a GP letter. I've done that, but then, oh, you need to follow up with that. Or with the supplements, for example, the ordering the supplements, checking if the patient has received them. So there's just so much admin that I didn't really feel much as a student, obviously, because that's what the dietitian had to do, or even prescribing supplements. But now it's just like you have to do it all. So I think that was also one of the biggest differences from being a student to a band 5 dietitian. What would you add to that, Claudia?
I completely agree. I think as a student, even if you don't realize it at the moment, if you're on placement, you are very protected from the boring stuff that you have to do as a dietitian. Yeah. So you normally, roll up to the hospital, do all the fun stuff, get to talk to patients, learn all the cool things, and then you sort of leave. As a dietitian, you have to do the whole setup that is needed for that to happen. And also, I'm not sure how it was for you, probably less on consolidation, but in general, I would get given patients to see. So my caseload was sort of organized for me. I also wouldn't really triage new referrals. So I would just get the patients who were already accepted onto the caseload, where at the moment I have to do sort of my own caseload sort of making. So I get all of the referrals sort of thrown at me and I have to go through them and see who's appropriate to be seen, who's not appropriate to be seen. So that's a big difference. Then sort of how you organize who you see on a day as well, that's fully up to you at the moment. So in a way, you do have way more flexibility in your day and what it looks like, which on placement wouldn't really be the case, because the supervisor would expect you to see, let's say, 2 patients in the morning, 2 patients in the afternoon, and it would also be kind of marked by how many patients you're able to see, which doesn't happen as a dietitian because you have so many other things to do that there might be days where you're only able to see 2 patients, and that's fine. If that's a day when you have particularly, loads of admin going on, I have loads of fed patients. Quite a few of them would be going home and with an enteral tube, so there's a lot of admin involved in that. I have to arrange a training, in some cases deliver training, liaise with community dietitians to make sure that they are aware of the patient coming, arrange all the deliveries to patient's house, and that can literally take half a day for one patient.
100%.
So that's something that we don't really think about as a student. I think it does depend on the placement, but quite a few placements don't make you have a thing of the priority of your patients. So kind of who you see first and that sort of stuff, they kind of just point that out to you. Be like, oh, see that patient, then this patient, then this patient, which again doesn't happen as a dietitian. So there's quite a few differences.
But with that, I'm sure, like, I would say prioritizing who to see in your day for the patient is quite a very important big skill, I would say. So even if your trust for some reason wouldn't do it, I'm sure you can take the initiative and ask them to, because it will really help you. And it's something, or it's just something that you got to practice on and get your head around it. So I would advise, if you don't do it, then I would advise to ask your supervisors, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to.
And that's something that I meant to mention for question 10, for any tips for final years. Definitely ask during your placement for them to teach you how to prioritize patients and to give you an opportunity to do that in a supervised environment, because it's really useful and it will come in handy. But with all that said, with all the differences, does consolidation in placement 3 genuinely reflect life as a band 5? And I would add, do you think that it prepares you for a life as a band 5?
My placement really did prepare me for a band 5 job. 100%. I was lucky because we were very different, with very different teams. I was exposed to so many patients, so many scenarios, so many scenarios that I had to act differently with patients, where you would gain from those, like my communication skills, my time management skills, my prioritization skills as well. And it's just that my biggest advice would be here is that actually use your placement well. It's literally given to you for you to develop those skills, those core skills that will be carrying on for the rest of your career as a dietitian. So this is your starting point to develop those skills. And if you ever feel like you're lacking a skill from somewhere, always ask. This is because, as you said, like, your supervisor is there for you. So if you've never seen a diabetic patient, for example, ask, oh, is it fine if I get a diabetic patient that I can gather information for and to speak to? Go for it. Or, for example, another good example is having a consultation with an interpreter there. You've never done one, ask if you can get one. And if you do, that's another experience and skill gained over there. So I think it does set you for the right pace for starting your job. But again, it varies between every trust. And I think it's the more you take initiatives for your own learning and progress and getting those skills, the easier or more well prepared you will be for your band 5 job.
Yeah, I would say it does and it doesn't, which is a really annoying answer. But essentially, like Amira said, I think it does prepare you with mastering all the skills that you need to be able to take on the band 5 role. but it's not the same as a band 5 role.
No.
So you still feel an immense step up when you're starting your band 5 position, I would say. And I think that's something that freaks people out, and it definitely freaked me out at first. In the first couple of weeks, I was like, how am I meant to see this many patients? How am I meant to do this? But I think both of us were quite lucky in a sense that we were in big teaching hospitals as well on our placements. So the environment was very similar to the one that we're working in at the moment. It might be that you're in a smaller hospital, in a district general, which doesn't mean that your placement will be any worse. It will give you different opportunities. But I think in any band 5 role, there will be things that you've never done before, and that's completely normal. But what your placement should have taught you is to know your scope of practice, sort of know the things that you haven't done, that you don't feel comfortable with, and how to seek help. And that's like a universal skill that you probably would have taken from placement. And I think that's really important, because it's unreasonable to expect that you would know how to do everything that you need to know as a band 5. So to answer the first part of this question, does consolidation genuinely reflect life as a band 5? No, it doesn't. But it does give you sort of a taster of what it's like, I would say. Yeah. And it does prepare you with all the skills that you need to take on that challenge.
Exactly, especially with all the admin stuff that you would need to do on the whole responsibility, and you're the independence that you would not really be getting as a student dietitian, but that all hits at band 5. So
yeah, and I think the caseload pressures as well, like for
yeah,
placement, I'm not sure what it is at the moment, but I think for me I had to see sort of 4 patients a day or something like that, which in my current role I would be really behind if I was seeing 4 patients a day. But again, it's not something to freak anyone out, because it is something that you gain with your role. For the first month, I was probably seeing 4 patients a day. But then, especially as you get familiar with the systems and you get familiar with the wards and the patients themselves as well, because it's easier to review a patient that you've been looking after for a month, for example. Yeah. And I think you also learn that you don't have to do A, B, C, D, E for every patient, especially if you're seeing them very regularly. You might be able to literally just do an assessment that's 4 sentences, and that takes 20 minutes and not an hour. But all of that you do learn with experience and with practice.
Exactly. And one thing also regarding caseload that just thought of, I think in community it's a lesser caseload, I would say, than you, for example, or acute in general. Even my colleagues, other band 5s in acute, like I think on my Mondays I would see 3 home visits and 2 patients booked for afternoon clinics, so that's 5. But with community, even though we do see less patients a day, we have more admin to do and much more referrals to do. So it's just like kind of covers it up with the whole community stuff that needs to be done. But yeah, I just thought to
if I would have a tube fed patient who was going home, I might even see only 2 patients on that day, because I have so much admin linked to that. So it is very flexible, and you really have to be gentle with yourself, but also acknowledge sort of the areas for development and how to do it, because a band 5 is a massive learning curve. And I can genuinely say I learned more in the last 3 months than I did over the last 4 years. And it's not an overstatement, sort of an over exaggeration, but that's what it's meant to be. So you will feel lost starting your band 5 role.
Oh yes.
I think it's really reassuring to know that it's normal, and everyone does.
Take it from me, it's been 3 weeks now, and sometimes I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here? Am I doing this right? Did I send this to the right person? Did I not do that? But it takes time. It all settles in as long as you know where you stand, you know your responsibilities, and you have a supportive team. You'll be fine. And for the last question, I'm just a bit wary of time, because I want to give you guys some time to give us some questions if there's any much more you want to ask. But what would be your top 3 final tips for final years, Claudia?
Ooh, I think we sort of briefly mentioned all of them, but just put them in one place. Make the most out of your placement, and do 100%. Take initiative. So ask to see things that you haven't seen, ask to develop the skills that you think you might use as a band 5, so you know how to prioritize your caseload, and any sort of small bits that you feel you might be missing from your placement so far. Second one, ask for help. So know the scope of your practice, what you're comfortable with doing, and be very okay with asking people, even if it's asking someone 5 times a day, if that's what needed to make your practice safe and to make you feel comfortable. And I think the third, just be gentle on yourself, because as I said, it is a massive learning curve for everyone. So it's not like you're lacking in any aspect or like you're not doing well enough. I think everyone's the same.
Right. I would want to add 2 more tips.
Mhm.
I think stay organized in your placement in terms of all the portfolio documents. Don't leave them for last minute. Get on top of your documents. And I think my other one would be, which would be really, really useful when applying for jobs, is have like a Word document or a spreadsheet with all the core skills and how you demonstrated them on placement. So for example, most commonly questions you get in the interview is like, oh, show us the way you've demonstrated some teamwork or communication skills or whatever. And then just make sure that when on placement, let's say on Monday, you actually attended an MDT meeting for that, note it down that you did an MDT meeting, or let's say you had a consultation with the patient where you required an interpreter or you had to do it by writing. All note it all down in that document so that you just have it there, because you're gonna forget, especially if it's a very long placement. So just note down all like the key stuff that you think that would gain you so much experience and so much skills, so that when the interview comes in, you have those examples that you can use. So I think that would be a really good advice that I would give.
I completely agree, and a bit of a shameless self-promo. If that's something that you're after, we do have a blog post on our blog. So if you go to the Future Frontline website and go to the dietetics sort of tab, there's a blog post written by me, how to sort of get your first job as a Band 5 dietitian. And I did sort of explain it there as well, how it's really useful. So what I had was an Excel spreadsheet. I looked at an example job advert for a Band 5 role and took all of the job specification points, so all the skills that you need to show. I copied them into like the column A on the Excel spreadsheet, and then column B was for me to write down examples as I go, or sort of things that I think would be suitable as the proof of sort of that skill when the interview came. And that was really useful, because then your interview essentially requires no prep from you. You just have to read over it and that's you ready.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're in our final stage, so it's our Q&A.
I'm just trying to move. Yeah.
Oh,
Here you go.
got
My
it.
internet is really slow, I think, so sorry.
It's fine. So I hope that was really useful, and I think we've got a couple of minutes now. If you guys got any more questions, then please hit them up in the chats. Okay, so our first question is, how difficult is it to find the first job as a Band 5 dietitian in the NHS? Ooh.
I think it's a really loaded question. It depends. I think the main thing that it depends on is quite how flexible you are with where you want to find your first job.
Yeah.
I really wanted to stay in London, so I wasn't really looking at anything outside of London, which in a way is very limiting because there's a lot of Band 5 jobs outside of London. I think second thing is the time of the year. So a lot of Band 5 jobs come up sort of August time, when when a lot of people probably would have started the Band 5 after graduating, and after a year or 2 years they are going up to Band 6. That's when the Band 5 becomes available again. I think there's slightly fewer sort of now-ish, so there definitely are trends in sort of when it's easier to find your Band 5, but I would generally say it's not difficult because of how understaffed the NHS is. So the staff members are always needed in dietetics as well. It's not an exception.
Exactly. And if you apply and you didn't get the first job, don't feel disheartened. It's okay. There's going to be much more. Just be patient and always ask for feedback, and just don't be disheartened. It's more jobs will come, more than you think you would. Trust me, out of experience.
Yeah.
Our next one. Oh, that's for you, Claudia. Did you share the Excel spreadsheet on the blog?
I didn't actually, because it's really basic. So if you literally go, so I did share the websites that I use to look for a job. If you go to any of them and just look for any band 5 role, at the very bottom of the page, you would have like a PDF with job specification. And then you normally have a table with basically all the skills that you need to show. So I literally just do copy paste, column A, and column B is empty. And it's basically just for me to note down the examples.
Yeah.
So it's not really worth sharing, I would say, because it's literally just a 2-column table. But if you DM me, our Instagram handles are going to be at the end of the presentation, then I'm more than happy to sort of explain it again, or share the file as well.
Claudia, my laptop just froze for a second. Can you just read the second question, please?
Yes. Did your trust provide you with, I never know how to say this word, a preceptorship program to help with the transition? And did you experience a new RD media expectations? So maybe the first one, do you have a preceptorship program in your trust?
I think I do.
I
think so. Yeah, I think they do offer it, and I think it's something worth asking in the interview. Whenever you're interviewing for a job, just make sure that they do offer it.
Yeah, for me, I do, and I would probably improve it if it was up to me, because how it works for us, we have 6 sessions, but they are spread over the 12 months. So it's a session every 2 months, and it's a whole day session from 9 to 5. And I'm not sure if it's the same in every trust, or is it because of how sort of MDT orientated our trust is, but it's for all the new band 5s. So for band 5 nurses, band 5 physios, band 5 speech and language therapists. So it won't be very specific to dietetics, but it will be sort of all the skills that you need as a new starting healthcare professional.
Yeah, it's good. I still haven't had my first session, but I do know my trust provides that.
Yeah.
So
and I do think that's something that would probably improve, because I've been working for 3 months and my first session is in February. So that will be half a year into my role.
Okay, makes sense.
Yes, I probably won't be there to complete all the 6 sessions, to be honest, which I think is a bit pointless, but yeah, they do offer it. And Amira, did your experiences as a new RD media expectations?
My experiences as a new RD meet my expectations. I mean, I knew I was like what I was getting myself into. I know the heavy caseload of the band 5s. I know how it is, and again, it's kind of, with me, it's a bit different because I knew I'm working now in the same trust where I did my placement, so I kind of knew what to expect. And I knew the experiences that I'll be getting from there. So I would say, yes, I did. I did know what will I be expecting in that job, to be honest.
I think mine did by now, but in the first month I really wanted to leave, which I think not many people talk about. But if you do feel that way, that's normal. And I know even people from Amira's trust that I talk to, because they are friends as well, they feel the same in the first month. So I think the one thing that placement doesn't prepare you for is the heavy workload, and they actually sort of leave work and think about your patients, because there's no one else who will sort of do that for you. Well, on placement, you are supervised by someone. The patients are technically not under you. They are under your supervisor. No, that's not a thing. So I had issues sleeping in the first couple of weeks. I was really, really stressed. And I think that's important to talk about as well. But it does get better. So now 3 months in, I would say that it did meet my expectations. I'm very happy in my role. But yeah, the first month I was questioning a lot if that's the right career for me, if I want to maybe go into community instead. I want to explore other options that dietitians can go into. But the advice that I got from everyone, not only dietitians, but also people working in completely non-healthcare related jobs, is give yourself 3 months. If you still hate it after 3 months, leave it. But it does take about 3 months to settle into the new workplace. I'm not sure if that's evidence-based, but it is something that came from a lot of different people. 3 months is what you need to sort of get into stuff.
I did hear that as well. And as I said, I never actually finished on time, which was just really very stressful. But again, I just started. And that's literally what everyone's been telling me: just give it time, you'll get better, you'll settle in better. 3 months, everyone's saying 3 months, and now I'm just like, I can't wait for those 3 months to come.
And it does feel like that at the beginning. Like,
I know.
I hated my job in the first 2 weeks, and I was thinking, oh, I have to give it 3 months just to sort of see how I'm doing. That didn't seem very realistic. I was a bit like, I don't want to be here for 3 months. But now I've completed 3 months this week, actually. Yeah, I definitely feel now is the first time that I really feel very settled.
And I think one advice I would say that I was also been given as a band 5, especially as a fresh graduate coming straight from university, with the caseload, like it's important to always point out to your supervisor if it's too much for you, in a sense that you really don't just want to be rushing with patients, but you actually want to learn and make sure you're doing things right. So yeah, like take the time to learn. I think as a new band 5, as you, Claudia, said, it's just so much learning in the beginning, but by time and especially by experience, you'll be just fine and much better in the future. So
yeah,
just
definitely.
Okay.
Do you find any challenges for service provision during the impact of COVID-19 when you become newly qualified? I think there might be more challenges in the community setting for you, Amira. I mean, I'm very happy to talk about the inpatient setting sort of after, but I feel like how you work probably changed a bit more for you.
Sorry, 1 second. Yeah.
No, don't worry.
I'm just reading the question. Do you find it there?
Yeah.
Service. I'm thinking of my answer, Claudia. So if you have your answer ready, you can go
That's
for
okay.
it.
No, don't worry. I think for hospital setting, the big thing that changed for me, I mean, it didn't change because I started in COVID, but that would be different if I started previously, is that probably a third of my caseload is COVID patients. So that's a big change in itself. The PPE is a massive change. So if I see a COVID patient, I need a full FFP3 mask, apron, gloves, all that jazz. So that has changed. The service provision itself for inpatient setting didn't really change, but it did change when I need to refer patients onwards. So I've had quite a few sort of gastro patients that normally would be seen in a gastro outpatient clinic once they are discharged. And at the moment, it would take sort of 4 months for them to be seen. So it probably led to me upskilling a bit and maybe learning a bit more of the gastro outpatient stuff to be able to give them advice in the interim for when they are waiting. So that's something that I can think of sort of on the spot. But inpatient setting itself didn't really change that much. If you're having outpatient clinics as part of your acute role, then that probably most likely would be via phone, where previously it would have been face-to-face. But again, that's quite a minor change, I would say, in how the service is provided. It is better for many people. I have loads of people who are sort of inquiring whether they can have a phone visit instead of coming to hospital. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question. Let us know in the chat if it didn't.
And I think in terms of community wise, again, we're now able to do home visits, so we're kind of getting back at it. I think with the peak of COVID, that was held on for a bit, so we're back to doing home visit, care homes visit as well. With the clinics, some clinics are going back to being outpatient, so that's really good. So yeah, we have some outpatient clinics now, so that's really good. Some of them are still over the telephone, and you can it's always the patient's choice as well if they would want to come in, if it was a face-to-face or if they want to have a telephone appointment. Also, yeah, that's slowly going back to how it was, which is I've quite found it. I mean, during placement, all I ever did was telephone appointments. I don't recall ever doing a face-to-face outpatient clinic, and I shadowed one this week, and it was very, very much, I would have preferred it much better. It's just that with that patient, you get that body language, you can actually show them the research you're explaining to them. I just found it much better, even for the patient themselves, and apparently patients do prefer that over telephone. But again, that is just very specific to that one clinic that I was at, so it's very different.
I was very lucky that I had a lot of outpatient sort of in-person exposure on placement.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
but now, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure why, because we did placement at the same time, but I guess it's how the
Yeah.
hospitals sort of handle risk assessment, maybe.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I had zero. I think the only one I had was at pediatrics, and it wasn't really like, it was like the first week. But
yeah.
yeah, so it was really nice. And even with home visits on placements, I've never done a home visit before. So now part of my job was the first time I ever do a home visit. So yeah, it's quite changed in that sense of COVID. Yeah,
I think my placement was just very lenient about COVID because
it
probably
looks like it.
in every clinic that I've done, we definitely had inpatient, in person
Ah,
people coming in bariatrics, diabetes, pediatrics, renal. We had loads of
that's
patients coming in.
that
They did
that's
do
really
home visits as
nice.
well.
See, that's really nice because before yesterday, when I went to the outpatient clinic, it felt like, oh wow, that's very different. Like we have a patient in the room and doing clinics. I'm never used to like, because when you're just doing telephone all the time, you're just on your laptop zoned in, just
Yeah,
doing your nose. But then when they're there, you're actually like have to face the patient, do
yeah.
all that. So it's just quite very different. And but yeah, we're slowly going there again.
I have one more thing that I came up with as an inpatient dietitian. What changed with COVID is the visitors, unfortunately. So for quite a few of my patients, they would have done significantly better from the nutrition perspective if the family could have come over to either sort of help feed them, especially for the elderly patients. A lot of them are very attached to a particular person. So if a family
Yeah.
member would be able to come and sort of help with that, that would be really helpful. Unfortunately, quite a few of my patients are very unwell. So in the last days of their life as well, it would be quite nice to have family next to them. It also links to sort of bringing food into hospital. It depends on a ward. The more sort of vulnerable wards, they wouldn't allow any food to be brought in from the outside. So that makes our job a bit more complicated when patients are quite fussy with what they will eat. We would normally sort of advise the family members, if possible, to bring in something that they enjoy, which at the moment, on quite a few of the wards, is just not possible
Yeah.
because of that.
And I would want to add one more thing with COVID. When we do our home visits, we still do wear our PPEs. So we'd want to have the masks on. We would have like the apron on and the gloves on before entering any patient's home. So that's still in place with COVID.
Yeah,
I
I'll have a
think,
mask on for the whole 9 hours and change it every 4 hours.
yeah. So I think we've run out of time. I mean, we literally did 10 more extra minutes. So
Probably can answer the last two questions though that we have
oh,
in the chat.
do we have more questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have the
Yeah.
last questions. So I think that one is for me. Do I think if I was provided with more support, I wouldn't want to leave in the first few weeks? Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes. It's nothing against my team. My whole team is absolutely lovely and they are so supportive. But I think it's just the time that I joined the service. Yeah, we were very short staffed. So even if my team, they really wanted to support me more, it just wasn't feasible in that moment. Then a week after I joined, another band 5 went for annual leave. So I had a double caseload in my second week of working as a band 5, which wasn't ideal because it's 9 wards. So that definitely added to the pressure. I think if I joined the team at a better time, that would definitely take some of the pressure away. So I would say definitely don't be too worried. Because yeah, I think I was just quite unlucky with the timing. That's what it was. And the
And our last
question,
question, I think it's, what's your own experience of the COVID pandemic as a student and newly qualified dietitian?
yeah.
I think I kind of did touch upon one of the things as in kind of during my placement. I never done home visits, never seen an outpatient face to face. But again, that was different between every trust because Claudia and her placement did do that. So now with as a newly qualified, I'm going back so I'm doing home visits now. My clinics are purely telephone, but I know some of my colleagues are going back to face to face. The PPE, for example, I remember that on placement was quite annoying to just always change your PPE every single time you want to go and see a patient. But again, it's for your own safety and the patient's safety as well. I think, to be honest, with COVID, just because we started our placement in COVID, by now it's just I'm used to it. and as in terms of like the regulations, the rules we need to do. As part of the NHS trust, for my trust, we have to do our lateral flow COVID test twice a week.
Same, yeah.
So yeah, I think just because we started that during our student time as a student placement, it just kind of continued now as a band 5, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was very similar for me. I think the one thing I wasn't required to see COVID positive patients on placement.
Yeah.
When it's a band 5, I'm the sole dietitian on the COVID ward. So I see all of the COVID positive patients, which at the beginning was really scary. I'm not going to lie, because obviously it's your normal instinct to avoid COVID as much as possible. So then if you go into the room with 20 COVID positive patients with no, I mean, you do obviously have a mask and, you know, your apron and your gloves, but it's against your natural instincts, I would say. So that was a big transition. But other than that, yeah, I fully agree with Amira that nothing really changed. Obviously, our uni in the middle of COVID pandemic was a bit crap, because you finish, you know, 4 years of your life, which is quite a big chunk, and don't really get to see the people that you graduated with. A lot of them went back home, which for quite a few people on our course was abroad. So we didn't have a chance to see them ever since. Yeah, but it's just the normal things that sort of everyone had to deal with over the last year. And in the grand scheme of things, you know, it's not too bad. There are worse things happening. But yeah, it's obviously ideal if the pandemic wasn't here. But I would say rest assured, that your experience as a newly qualified dietitian won't be too different.
Yeah, and with the regulations and like things are easing now compared to how it was before. We still do, like, as part of our team, like gather for lunch, Christmas party that we're going to be having as part of our team, so that we wouldn't have the chance to do all that previously, but now we are. So promising stuff. So hopefully all the best. And yeah, so I think that is it.
Yeah, let me go to the last page if my laptop cooperates finally. Yeah, here we go.
Well, I just wanted to say a massive thank you all for joining us today. I really, really do hope that was very helpful. If anything, any questions come up later, you can feel free to message me on Instagram on Your Health Things, or message Claudia on Instagram on her Hungry Evidently account. So yes, please do that and connect with us for future Frontline. And before you leave, I would really do appreciate if you could fill our feedback form. So it's just a way that we know how to improve better for next time, and to see how you guys thought of this session. I can drop in the link on the chat.
Yes. While you do that, thank you so much everyone for joining and for your amazing questions. It was a very interactive session, which we were sort of hyping for. So thank you for being so involved. And I just sort of question whether you will have access to the recording. Yes, it will be on our YouTube channel. So the Future Frontline YouTube channel, it will be saved over there. Just like all of our webinars as well. So if you want to catch up on any of the previous ones, they are all saved onto the YouTube channel. I'm not sure how long it normally takes, Amira, for it to be uploaded.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure myself, to be honest. Sorry, I'm just putting the link
No,
up.
don't worry. Yeah, so it will be there. If it's not there the next time that you check, it's probably just not there yet. But ultimately, it will be uploaded onto there.
We'll do our best to upload it as soon as possible. And yeah, I just sent the link on the chat. So we'd really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to do it. And in the end, you do get a choice to get a certificate of attendance as well. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the session, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon.
I'm so sorry for running over time, but thank you for staying with us. Yeah,
all right.
Enjoy your evening, guys, and the rest of the weekend. Let me stop sharing. Dun, dun, dun.
So okay, so I saved it. I said when it said start recording, it was either desktop or iCloud. I chose desktop.
Cool. So that's going to save onto your drive, as in like on